Chapter 41. Being behind the tree, I didn't see it if Miss Love slapped Grandpa or pushed him away. By the time I finally peeped around, they were back in the car. Miss Love was pinning her red hat on straight again, so I couldn't see her expression, but I could see Grandpa's, and he didn't look contrite or guilty either one. He looked like a boy playing tops who's just won everybody's tobacco tags. Before he could kiss her again and me have to wait it out behind the tree, I yelled, "I got the grits," and hurried towards them. After pouring the grits into a napkin out of the picnic basket so I could use the bucket, I filled the radiator from the creek and cranked up. I was just fixing to pour in the grits when I thought to wonder how in heck you could get cooked grits out of a radiator. "I don't think we'd better try it, Miss Love," I said. I folded the napkin and held it out to her. "You want the grits, ma'am?" "I reckon you got a better idea," Grandpa said, sarcastic. He was disappointed. Fixing a leak with grits would be something to tell and laugh about all week, like that time we ran out of inner tube patching and rode home on a tire stuffed with a piece of old quilt. "Well, it might plug the leak, Grandpa, I don't know. But I think it'd ruin the radiator. We can risk it, sir, if you're willing to buy a new radiator, but, let's try something else, Will Tweedy." "Grandpa, the colored woman said we'd come to a town called Cushy Springs in about 2 miles. We just follow the creek at the next fork instead of staying on the Athens Road. That way, we can keep getting water to pour in the radiator, and if we make it to the town, maybe we can find a mechanic with soldering tools." We made the 2 miles, but it was an awful drive on a narrow, rutted wagon road. On one side was the creek, on the other a ditch so deep that if you got in it, you'd never get out without a mule team. In low spots, we hit sand. I had to stay in low gear to get through that. In the meanwhile, I was feeding oil to the cylinders and water to the radiator. Kept that bucket going the whole way. When we got there, I was wore out, and the heat and burning oil had made a dirty brown mess out of the Pierce's neat new engine. Cushy Springs was not what I'd call a town. It was just a handful of houses, scant hope of finding a mechanic here. But probably we could hire a mule team to pull us into Athens. Grandpa said, "Let's ring up Mr. Shackelford and get him to send a mechanic." Mr. Shackelford had a garage over in Athens. I said, "You see any telephone poles in Cushy Springs, Grandpa?" He looked around. "No, but what's that got to do with anything?" "How can we telephone, sir, if Cushy Springs ain't got no telephones?" "Don't be smart, Alec, Will. We'll think of something." We stopped at the first house we saw. The young man who came to the door could hardly say howdy for trying to look around us at the automobile and at fashionable Miss Love, who was leaning out of the car to shake the dust from her veil. Grandpa introduced himself and stated the situation. "You know anybody who could get a message over to Athens for us?" The young man said he'd do it. Be glad to. "I work in Athens and I'm just fixing to leave. Been down here seeing my folks. This is my mama," he said as an old lady came up behind him and said howdy. "Howdy, ma'am," said Grandpa. "And this here's my daddy," he said, smiling at a little old man who came around the house leading a big roan horse that was saddled up. "Pleased to meet you, sir," said Grandpa, shaking hands. "Are you acquainted with Mr. Shackelford's son? We got a leaking radiator." The young man said he boarded right up the street from Mr. Shack's shop. Mounting the horse, he promised to go see him soon as he got back. "But I guarantee you he ain't gonna send nobody over here to work on a Sunday." "In that case," said Grandpa, "I got another favor to ask." Writing his name and Papa's on a scrap of paper, he said to please ring up Hort Tweedy and Cold Sassy and say we'd be home sometime tomorrow. He offered a quarter to pay for the call, but the young fellow wouldn't take it. As he galloped off, his mother reached up to tidy her white hair like we were real company and said in a slow, drawly voice, "Looks to me like y'all got to spend the night someplace, folks. You'd be mighty proud to put you up, wouldn't we, Mr. Nolly?" It being the custom not to take anybody up on the first invite, Grandpa insisted we just find us a hotel. She laughed. "Ain't no hotel in Cushy Springs, not even a boarding house." Glancing at Grandpa's spiffy new suit and then at the car and Miss Love's motoring costume, she said, kind of embarrassed, "We ain't got no bathroom, electric lights like all y'all in Cold Sassy. But if and your daughter don't mind, you welcome as can be." "It's my wife, ma'am, and she won't mind." Grandpa motioned Miss Love to come up to the porch, which she did. After introductions all around, the old lady apologized again for the kerosene lamps in the privy. Of course, Miss Love said that was all right. but she didn't once in the whole time we were there admit she had a privy too, or mention her well water and lamplight. The old lady's name was Miss Gussie. Mr. Nolly's real name, she said, was Knowledge Henry Jameson. I never heard a name like that before. When I got home, I put it down in my journal. What I heard later that night, I wouldn't have dared put down in my journal. But I didn't need to. I knew I'd never forget any of it. The Jamesons wanted to look at the piers. What with all the mud and dust and oil stains, it wasn't much to show off, but they were real impressed, especially after Grandpa said we'd give them a ride when we got the radiator fixed. Miss Love seemed upset and awful nervous. I reckon Miss Gussie noticed because she told her to go sit down on the porch. Make yourself to home, honey, and rest a spell. We just having sausage and cornmeal batter cakes and sorghum syrup. I don't need no help. But Miss Love went on to the kitchen anyway, I guess to get away from Grandpa. Considering her new prospects for the future, you'd think she'd be all smiles instead of upset. As I learned later, she was upset because she thought she didn't want the kind of future that Grandpa had in mind. Us men sat down on the back porch steps and watched the sun set behind the barn. After talking hard times a while, Mr. Nolly asked questions about the piers, and then politely inquired as to Grandpa's business. You got your store? My brother Big Dog had a store one time. Big Dog's name was Early. We just called him Big Dog. Pointing way off across the fields to a little log house at the edge of the woods, he laughed and said, That's Big Dog's drinking place. His wife won't let him in the house when he's drunk, so he goes over yonder and she sends a colored boy named Fish to see after him. Normally, Grandpa would have come up with a joke or a story then, but he kept looking towards the kitchen. His mind was on Miss Love. Mr. Nolly was thinking about her too, because he soon said, "Excuse me for asking, but ain't Miss Blakesley a Yankee? She kind of talks like one." After Grandpa explained she was from Baltimore, Mr. Nolly said, "We got a real Yankee here in the county. He's bow-legged, great goodness. That damn son of a gun come in here 2-3 years ago and bought up a farm at sheriff's sale. Painted the house red, white, and blue, and then rode the train back up north and got married. All I got to say, that woman must have been hard up for a husband coming down here where ain't nobody gonna speak to her, to live in a red, white, and blue house with a bow-legged man. She's bow-legged herself, though, and horse-faced, so they ain't a bad match. Miss Gussie says she can't wait to see the fruits of that harvest." "Say, did you know W.T. started?" Mr. Nolly asked. "He moved over here from Cold Sassy. W.T. ain't much if you ask me." "No, nor his daddy neither," said Grandpa. "His dad is dead now. Last time I seen him, he just set fire to a dog." I didn't remember old Mr. Started, but I'd heard about the dog on fire. "He was the one did that?" I asked. "He was the one," said Grandpa, and then told Mr. Nolly how in summertime there's always a bunch of old men playing checkers on a barrelhead out under this great old big sassafras tree at the depot. One day a starving, mangy old dog come along, scrounging for a biscuit, and that fool Stoddard decided to put him out in his misery with kerosene and a match. Whilst the poor thing howled and rolled and whirled in the flames, them old men sat there just a-laughing. I happened by about then, pulled out my pistol, killed the dog, and shot that checker game to kingdom come." He shook his head. "I'm just as glad young W.T. chose to locate over here." At supper that night, my napkin slid off of my knee. Bending down to pick it up, I saw Grandpa squeeze Miss Love's hand that was in her lap. When Miss Gussie said she'd show us our rooms, Grandpa looked so excited you'd think all he lived for was to go to bed at night. While we took turns at the privy, she got out a soft white nightgown for Miss Love. "It's the one I saved for nice. I embroidered them roses on it myself," she said proudly, handing it over. Then she got some towels and wash rags out of a cupboard in the hall and, carrying a lighted kerosene lamp, led us up the steep stairs. "Now this here's yourn and Mr. Blakesley's room," she told Miss Love. Holding her lamp high, she opened the door into a neat, plain room with old-timey furniture and a 1903 Arm & Hammer baking soda calendar on the wall. "I see Mr. Nolly filled up your water pitcher like I told him to." Miss Love's face had flushed at the words, "Yourn and Mr. Blakesley's room." To hide her embarrassment, she moved to the bed and ran her hand over the heavy purple and black coverlet. Who wove it, Miss Gussie? Mama did, when she warn't but 16-year-old. Spun the wool and dyed it, weaved them panels and stitched them together. Ain't it a beauty? Miss Gussie put her lamp down on the washstand, struck a match, and lit the lamp on the bed table. There's some quilts in the chest. Y'all might need 'em. Mr. Nolly thinks it's going to turn off cold tonight. Just as I started to wonder where I was supposed to sleep, Miss Gussie opened the door over by the head of the bed. This here used to be my sewing room, she said. But I fixed it up for my grandboys, Horace and Ulysses. They's 8 and 10-year-old now. They spend every summer here with us, helping Mr. Nolly around the place. Both them cots sleep good, son, so take your pick. She lit a small lamp in there, then said good night and went back downstairs. Miss Love looked at Grandpa. Where do you want to sleep, sir? Like there wasn't any question, he nodded toward the big post bed and said, like teasing, this here's where Miss Gussie said sleep. I reckon we better mind her. Figuring they'd have to argue a while, I got a book off the bureau and took it to the little room. Though they lowered their voices, I distinctly heard Grandpa say, one thing for sure, Miss Love. With 2 cots and a double bed, I ain't gonna sleep on the floor like I done in New York City. Well, so Mama and Aunt Loma had worried for nothing about New York City. Miss Love just laughed at him. If you'd been willing to spend the money, sir, we could have had separate rooms. Weren't you lucky there were 2 berths on the boat? Peeping around the door, I saw him slap her behind playful, and she laughed again. It was the first time all evening she'd seemed like her regular self. But then he got serious. Can't we just sleep in here, Miss Love, please? Shh, don't talk so loud, Mr. Blakesley. I was about to pass out, I was so tired. Where y'all want me to sleep? I called from the little room. On one of the cots, Miss Love said quickly. Mr. Blakesley will sleep in there too. I'll sleep in here. That's going to look like Will Tweedy spent half the night on one cot and the rest of it on the other, said Grandpa. Miss Gussie will think he won't comfortable. The upshot was that Miss Love decided to sleep in the cot room and let me and Grandpa take the big bed. I couldn't help thinking how funny all this would sound to somebody who didn't know she was just his housekeeper. There being only one washstand, Grandpa and I had to stay in the little room with the door shut while Miss Love bathed. I laid down on one of the cots while we waited. Grandpa paced the floor. The whole time she was washing up, he stopped walking only long enough to hitch up his trousers and scratch his head. Like if he scratched hard enough and fast enough, he might think how to get his way. We finally heard Miss Love pour her dirty water out of the wash bowl into the waste pot on the floor. But it was some time before she knocked and said she was through. Grandpa rushed open the door, and it was like he'd opened onto a flower garden. Miss Love had on so much perfume. She stood there in the doorway, holding the red hat in her hand and her clothes draped over one arm. The white gown peeked out above and below her coat, which she was using like a robe. In the soft lamplight, she looked real pretty. Her freckled face was flushed, her eyes bright in the frame of dark lashes, her hair plaited into a thick, shiny braid that hung down the left side of her neck. I'm sorry it took me so long, she said, her voice steady. Grandpa surprised me by leaning over and kissing her on the cheek. Good night, he said. For a long moment, they stood there staring at one another, like his eyes were steel and hers a darn magnet. Her lips trembled. There being no way to get past them, I just sat there on the cot, half asleep, watching them block the doorway. Finally, Grandpa took a deep breath, which shook a little as he let it out. I know you plumb wore out, Miss Love. No, not really. I feel fine. I feel fine. Are you very tired? Gosh almighty, no. If I was a bull, I could bust through a fence right now and never feel it. He touched her arm. She didn't move away. He laughed softly. But I reckon I won't be doing that tonight. Well, Miss Love, sleep good, yeah? Call me if you need anything. They were still staring at one another. Be sure and call me if there's anything I can... Thank you, I won't need anything, Mr. Blakesley. Good night, sir. She moved past him into the little room. I reckon she'd forgot all about me because it startled her when I got up from the cot. Good night, Will. Good night, ma'am. She patted my arm as I went out. Then she shut the door. Grandpa walked over to the washstand and poured some water into the big flowery bowl. but I just pulled off down to my union suit and turned back the covers. I was too tired to care about road dust. Which side do you want to sleep on, Grandpa, left or right? It don't matter, son. Like I used to tell your granny, ever which side I'm on is the right side. She always said hers was the one next to the cradle or closest to the kitchen. I was standing on the side by the door to Miss Love's room, so I just got in there. The wall between my head and hers was only one thin board, and I soon realized it might as well not be there. I heard her pull up the quilt, I heard her turn over, I heard her sigh. I must have dropped right off to sleep. I didn't know when Grandpa came to bed, but I knew when he got up. The coil springs squeaked and waked me. I thought he just needed to use the pot, which he did, but then he moved around the bed. Every time a board creaked underfoot, he stopped and looked over at me. It wasn't like Grandpa to notice or care if he was disturbing somebody. Plain as day, he didn't want me to wake up, so I didn't. Not for him to know it. But I watched as he tiptoed over to the window where he'd laid his clothes on a chair and, standing in a long slanting rectangle of moonlight, put on his pants over his union suit and pulled up the suspenders. Instead of knocking on Miss Love's door, he opened it quiet as a burglar. I heard her gasp. He whispered, "Shh, it's me. I'm a-comin' in." There wasn't any question mark in his voice, but she whispered, Well, all right." And I heard her get up. Grandpa closed the door, but it didn't any more shut me out than if I was a ghost. I doubt they were standing more than 2 feet from my head when he grabbed her. "Oh, Lord, Miss Love, you don't know how long I've been waiting to hold you like this." His voice was muffled, as if his face was buried in her neck. "Seems like all my life." She laughed kind of nervous and whispered in a teasing way, "Now, Mr. Blakesley, that's no way to talk to a housekeeper." "I ain't a-talking to no dang housekeeper, Miss Love. I'm a-talking to my wife." Still teasing and I guess holding him off, she whispered, "I won't be the wife of anybody who calls me Miss, and I have to call him Mr. So, Mr. Blakesley, go back to bed." He whispered right back, "If and Miss and Mister is all that's coming betwixt us, I sure wished you'd have said so in New York City. Your name's Love? Ain't no problem. My name's Rucker, pleased to meet you." And then before she could say Pete Turkey, he grabbed her again. This time, if my ears heard right, she grabbed him too. After a while, she whispered, "Oh, dear God, what are we going to do?" I reckon Grandpa found her mouth before God could answer, because for the longest time, the only sounds I heard were little moans and gasps and Grandpa's hard breathing. He sounded like it was all uphill in there. Miss Love must have pulled away to judge by her voice as she whispered, "Please, Mr. Blakesley, if you knew..." And then she went to crying. "Hush now, shh, shh, shh. Ain't nothing to cry about, Miss Love, less'n you don't love me, which if you said it, I wouldn't believe you. Love, Love, oh Love, it ain't hard at all to call you Love, or to say you're beautiful or how sweet you smell. You're like Miss Mattie Lou's rose garden, Love." They kissed again. "You're shivering," he said. "I could warm you up." "I'm not cold. Don't, Mr. Blakesley, you'll tear Miss Gussie's gown." His whispered voice was hoarse. Good God in heaven. I thought he was about to say it's time to pray, but for what seemed like an hour or two, all I heard was them breathing and kissing. I'm gonna try to say what I was feeling all that time. "What are you doing? Don't," she said all of a sudden, alarmed. "I'm just loosening your braid. I ain't never seen your hair down, Love. I want to feel it. I want to feel it on my face." "Please go back to bed, sir. The boy might hear us." He groaned. "I ain't studying him. He's dead asleep anyhow. Listen to him." Like I was in cahoots with Grandpa, I snored softly. I couldn't stand the embarrassment if they knew I was awake. They were silent a minute, then she whispered, "There's so much you don't know." Smack. "Then say it, Love, but make haste. I've been a-waiting for you 1,000,000 years. I can't wait no longer." I was shocked, and she must have felt the same. But I only agreed to be your housekeeper." Her whisper rose in pitch, an angry sound. "I will not be taken advantage of, Mr. Blakesley. How dare you try to use me like why, I trusted you." "I love you, Miss Love. Can't you see that? And today It seemed like you loved me too. What are you saying, Mr. Blakesley? You deaf? I'm saying I love you, dang it. I'm saying I want you to be my wife. I'm saying I've been awaiting to hold you in my arms ever since the day we got married. No, way longer than that. Lord help me. Miss Love, I've been awaiting for this minute ever since the day I laid eyes on you. It made me sick hearing that. Please, Mr. Blakesley, you don't know what you're saying. Her words were more softly spoken than whispered, and I could tell she had moved away from him nearer the door. I don't believe you never made one gesture, sir. Never said one word. No, but every time I looked at you, I thought it. God help me, I've been loving you and hating myself every time I... You never did anything wrong, she protested, like she wanted to take up for him. Then she lowered her voice again. I never once suspected. That's why I was so shocked when you asked me to marry you. I didn't think you'd even noticed me, Mr. Blakesley. I was scared to notice you. Scared somebody would notice me noticing. Scared Miss Mattie Lou might, and I wouldn't have hurt her. I heard him sink heavily onto the cot, and he must have bent his head down to judge by his voice. Miss Mattie Lou knowed something was eating up my soul, Miss Love. She kept a saying, Mr. Blakesley, tell me what's worrying you so. And when she took sick... Shh, you're talking too loud, sir. Please don't wake up Will. Go on back to bed now, and we'll talk when... I've got to talk now, he said, but minding her and dropping his voice to a whisper. By the time we get home, I might have lost my nerve. I used to beg God to take away my craving for you. When I'd get up off my knees, I'd feel better. But then the very next day, I'd watch you working at your table, and I couldn't hardly stand it. You were so beautiful. Then Miss Mattie Lou took sick, and I got scared the Lord might take her to punish me for my sin. I ain't never believed God was that mean. But what if he was? I commenced begging for forgiveness. When she was so sick, I got the notion if I didn't go down to the store where I'd see you, I could get you out of my system. Miss Mattie Lou was... she married me when I want nothing, Miss Love. She'd give me all she had when her daddy died. And she ruined her health having babies that didn't live, trying to get me a son to carry on the name. She knowed how much. His voice broke. She would have tried again, but the doc said another baby would kill her. So I made sure that didn't happen. I love Miss Mattie Lou very much. You understand that? I could hear tears in her voice as she whispered, Yes, of course I do. She was part of me. I could tell her anything. Except about you, of course. It was just like with Will Tweedy and now you. I can cut the fool with anybody, but there ain't many folks I can really talk to. Well, after what Doc said, I stayed off from her. Mr. Blakesley, it's not right to tell me all this. I got to tell somebody. You rather I tell Will Tweedy, or Mary Willis, or Loma? I'm saying I stayed off from her, and after a while the fire went out. Seemed like she was just my sister, my friend, not my wife. It was like all the feelings I ever felt, a man for a woman, I mean, they was just dead. Then I went to the depot to get you when you come in on that train from Baltimore, Miss Love. I took one look at you, so young and feisty, and hankered after you like a schoolboy. Hush, sir, hush. You don't know what I've been through these 2 years, Miss Love. Lord, I wished we didn't have to whisper. I'm a-getting hoarse. Go back to bed, Mr. Blakesley. We'll talk later. It was like she was speaking to a child. He paid no attention. After you left off living in our house and went to the Crabtrees, Miss Love, I couldn't wait to get to the store every morning. If I was sick, I went on anyways. I thought I'd die when a whole day went by and I didn't get to see you. Often as I dared to, I'd tell Miss Mattie Lou, set a place for the milliner at Sunday dinner here. She's kind of homesick. Well, she don't get good cooking at Miss Crabtree's, not like yourn. You and me and her, we'd have such a good time round that piano after dinner. It kind of eased my guilty feelings, seeing how fond of you she was. But then, by George, you commenced keeping company with that fool son Black. I couldn't hardly stand it. He didn't mean a thing to me. He was just... How was I to know? And then Miss Mattie Lou was a-dying. I sat there by her in that rocking chair day after day, loving her and grieving. But in the backside of my mind, I was wondering if you might up and marry that son of a gun just when it looked like... Shh! Don't say it, Mr. Blakesley. Please, let's stop talking. The boy... I coughed and coughed again like in my sleep, and then snorted and turned over. It'd take an earthquake to wake him up tonight. There was a pause. Your skin, it's so soft, love. See, it ain't hard at all to call you love. Your cheek, love, is like... He laughed. Like a mule's nose, like velvet. She laughed too. He kissed her gently. I know it was gently because it didn't smack. Love, when I sat there with Miss Mattie Lou, I wasn't just begging God's forgiveness. I was praying she'd get well, but I was... There's nothing wrong with that, Mr. Blakesley. God wants us to ask for his healing hand. Let me finish. God didn't want nobody to ask like I done. Gosh almighty, Miss Love, all the time I was praying him to spare Miss Mattie Lou like he was a dang Santa Claus. I was thinking that if and she died, I could marry you. I swear I saw the ghost of Granny flick distraught around the room. I wanted to sick her on him, shout, "He ain't in here, Granny, he's in yonder with her, go haint him." Soon as I thought it, I hoped she wouldn't. Back when she was alive and him lusting in his heart after another woman, it's a wonder God hadn't strung Grandpa up by his heels and split him down the middle. But I couldn't hate him now. And I hoped Granny up in heaven didn't hate him, and I hoped Miss Love wouldn't. If a man's been horsewhipping himself for 2 years, it seemed to me like not even God would want to punish him anymore. I couldn't hear everything they said that night, especially when they moved away from the door. I missed words and even sentences when occasionally I breathed deep or snored a little so they wouldn't guess I was awake. But I heard most of it. After Grandpa's confession, Miss Love had tears in her voice. "You poor dear man. I'm so sorry, so very sorry." She whispered it over and over and then begged him to go back to bed. But Grandpa said he wanted done talking. Miss Mattie Lou's last few days, well, the good Lord finally set me free of you, Miss Love. My mind and heart was all on her. I knowed she was gonna die, and all I wanted was for her to live. I kept thinking back over the years and knowed they was good years. I kept thinking how we used to talk in bed at night, how I was gonna miss that, how I already missed it. He took a long breath. But Miss Love, all such didn't last past the funeral. After I wrote down her dying in the Bible, I turned around and seen you standing there watching me. And from then on... Oh, Mr. Blakesley, as God is my witness, I never guessed it, never encouraged... I know that. I just wish you had encouraged me. Then I could have risked waiting a proper time to start courting you. As it was, I was twixt the rock and the hard place, afeared somebody else would get you in the meantime. That fool's son Black, for instance. I would never have married him. Well, I didn't know if you would or you wouldn't. On the other hand, if I proposed right off, you'd think I was a dirty old man or that Miss Mattie Lou hadn't meant nothing to me. You wouldn't have no respect for me. He sighed like he was lost in thought. Finally, he said, I commenced going by the cemetery every night after I left the store, Miss Love. I know, I heard. He laughed, soft and kind of rueful. It wasn't with me like that poor Miss Ernestine Tip lady. You never knowed her. Miss Ernestine would go to the cemetery every evening to see old Mutt. That's what she called her husband. She'd tell him how she was feeling and all, and any news she'd heard, and when she left, she'd blow him a kiss and say, "Good night, Mutt." Folks seen her do it. Then after a while, Miss Ernestine got to saying goodnight to everybody else in the graveyard, calling them all by name. Poor thing finally commenced passing the time of day with them. Couldn't get home to fix supper for talking to dead folks. He paused. What I'm saying, I didn't go to the cemetery to talk to Miss Mattie Lou. It seemed like being there calmed me down some. He coughed. Gosh almighty, Miss Love, it's getting cold, and my throat's wore out from this here whispering. Will Tweedy's asleep, and if and he ain't, Well, I ain't studying Will Tweedy right now. At the cemetery, he said he did wonder sometimes what Miss Mattie Lou would tell him to do if she could talk. Late one night, I was so tired, Miss Love, I just laid down on the cool, fresh dirt, right on her grave. It felt like when we used to lay in bed together talking. I reckon you think I was off in the head. No, I understand. Well, anyhow, it come to me something Miss Mattie Lou said long time ago, back when Mary Willis was on the way. She said, Mr. Blakesley, if God takes me in childbed, I remember trying to hush her up, but she had it on her mind. She said, if and I pass, I hope I done made living with a woman so sweet that, well, find you another wife and I'll take it as a compliment. Miss Love started to speak, but he went on, talking low. That sure made it easier to think on marrying you, Miss Love. It was like she'd give me her blessing. And whilst I was still a-laying over her in the dark night, I remembered something else she said one time. If and the Lord calls me first, Mr. Blakesley, don't be too stingy to hire you a colored woman. I can't rest easy up there if you down here wearing dirty clothes and nobody to see after you. That's what gave me the idea to ask you to be my housekeeper. He didn't say anything for a minute, or her either. I reckon they were kissing. Then he went on, I figured if and I could just get you sewed up, I could do the courting later. But I knowed I'd have to make it worth your while, me being old and all the talk and scandal of it. Took me about 2 minutes to decide you'd go against age and custom both for something big as a house. She giggled, a little self-conscious. I think I'd have done it for the piano. The piano cinched it. Then 2 days later, here come Mr. Texas. It like to killed me seeing you was still in love with him. I heard Grandpa get up from the cot and start pacing the floor. When he stopped, he breathed a long sigh that trembled in the night air. Stealing Mary Willis's trip to New York City was a selfish thing I done. Miss Love plain admitted that it was her fault. I thought Mary Willis had definitely decided not to go. Lord help me. When I seen you wanted to go so bad, all I could think was up there in New York I'd have you to myself with nobody around to cast looks. And maybe I'm beginning to hate myself, Mr. Blakesley. For marrying me? For not guessing how you felt about me. I never even suspected it till we got to New York. I didn't know you caught on then, Miss Love. I didn't want you to know it. You might near as good an actress as Loma. I thought I just lost a hang of courting. She didn't answer that. Mr. Blakesley, if you'd said you loved me when you proposed, I wouldn't have married you. I had decided never to marry, for reasons I can't speak of, for reasons no man would want to marry me. But you said, there can't be no reason any man wouldn't be proud to marry you, Miss Love. But you said you just wanted a housekeeper, Mr. Blakesley. You don't know how I had longed for, prayed for what you offered. A home, and to belong to a good, decent family. It was as if God had finally figured out a way to give it to me. It wasn't God figured it out, love. It was me. And now I'm asking you to be my wife. When she didn't answer, he said, you can't say you don't care for me. Of course I care for you, sir, but not like that. I'm sorry. That ain't what your arms said or your lips said when I was a-kissing you. I got carried away. Ain't getting carried away part of what loving is? You don't understand. She spoke stiff and formal. Loving, being a wife, that door is closed to me. After Mr. McAllister, I promised God. There was an awful silence. Then Grandpa exploded. Promised God or promised yourself? Gosh almighty, woman, God don't ask for no such a promise. It was the only way I could find peace. And now I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm tired. Mr. Blakesley, please go to bed. What you and somebody else done, love, that's over with now. Same as my life with Miss Mattie Lou is over with. That hand I ain't got no more. Ever what you done can't be no worse than me loving you whilst I sat by her deathbed. But ain't no point in me giving you up now that she can't get hurt. Ain't no point in you messing up what you and me could have just 'cause you and that dang Mr. Texas. It wasn't him. Her whisper was so weak I barely heard. But don't ask me to talk about it. Plate couldn't take the knowledge. You couldn't either. You told him what you won't tell me? Yes, I thought... She sounded about to cry. I thought I shouldn't have any secrets from the man I was about to marry. I thought if Clayton really loved me, how stupid I was. I wondered if she meant stupid to tell him or stupid to think he wouldn't mind. He'd thought I was so pure, not like the others. You understand, pure, Mr. Blakesley? Undefiled? Silence.